Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 2 of the Film Ignite podcast. For all things film and all things TV, this is the place to be. In today's episode, we're going to be discussing the 1994 classic written and directed by the legendary Quentin Tarantino, Pulp Fiction. So, a little backstory on how I got introduced to Tarantino. I had never been into film for quite a long time. I knew I really liked watching movies, but nothing really sparked in me wanting to make them. In summer of 2019, I saw Once Upon a Time in Hollywood in theaters, and I was drawn in by seeing Leonardo DiCaprio, who is easily one of the best actors working today, and other big names like Brad Pitt and Margot Robbie, and it looked like a really cool movie. After watching it, I knew I had just broken the surface of what was to come with Tarantino, and I was eager to check out the rest of his films. It came as a surprise to me just how many of his films I had already known about and just never actually thought were his or actually got the chance to watch. So a few days after, I popped open Netflix, put on Pulp Fiction, and the rest is history. Now, in the last episode, I talked about how Saw is my favorite horror movie of all time. Well, Pulp Fiction is definitely up there for my favorite movie of all time in general. I really love this movie. Now, for starters, Tarantino decides to tell a story in such an interesting way in this film. The film starts in a diner where it looks like a couple is about to pull off a robbery, and there's some really great acting and dialogue here by Amanda Plummer and Tim Roth. Then all of a sudden, we just get this freeze frame and it cuts to title cards. Now, Tarantino movies are famous for having really old school introductions with lots of music and an opening credits scroll. It really works well for a lot of his movies and adds a special type of charm and signature style to his work. And in the title sequence of Pulp Fiction alone gives me goosebumps. As soon as the surfer music kicks in, it's just fantastic to watch. Some great attention to detail is also paid within the opening scenes alone. When the name of the sound designer for the movie pops up on screen, the song playing on the radio changes. Just an interesting little detail that I liked. It's a fantastic opening scene, and it really sets the stage for the rest of the film. But once we're done with the credits, we're in a car with Jules and Vincent played by Samuel L. Jackson and John Travolta. And between Tarantino's ability to craft a script that is so littered with quotable lines, giving a breath of fresh air to each conversation and making it seem so natural and relatable, to the fantastic chemistry that Jackson and Travolta have with each other, make for so many great moments. Samuel L. Jackson starts off the movie with his infamous "Say what again" speech, and it's brilliant in every way. I love how the movie starts out this way, giving us an inside look at the hitman job, and these two leads have such great comedic timing and delivery as well, along with the fact that Tarantino's script is so sharp that just a few minutes we get with them before the job talking about foot massages and fast food is so oddly entertaining to listen to, because we're just watching these larger-than-life characters who are supposed to be cold-blooded killers just have a normal conversation. Then we're introduced to Bruce Willis's character, and his name is Butch, and I love Bruce Willis in this movie. I haven't seen very many movies with him in it. Most of the ones I have seen have been pretty decent to average, except for the big classics like The Sixth Sense or Die Hard. But Bruce Willis in Pulp Fiction gives such a great performance. And the first time I saw this movie, I was not expecting Bruce Willis to be in it at all. And when he shows up in this movie, has this massive role, it really took me by surprise. Now, the dinner scene with Vincent and Mia Wallace is particularly my favorite sequence in the entire movie. The vibes are truly immaculate during this scene, as the set design and overall aesthetic of the 1950s themed restaurant is just so immersive and amazing to me. The first time I watched Pulp Fiction, I thought this entire sequence was the most boring, believe it or not, but that's because I had this vision in my head about what Pulp Fiction was supposed to be, and I assumed non-stop action from start to finish. But on a rewatch, I appreciated this sequence so much more, just because of how well written the dialogue is. It's sharp, it's witty, it's funny, and it's entertaining as hell. The small moments in this movie that you pick up on rewatches make it so incredible. A favorite theory of mine is that when Mia talks about the Fox Force 5 joke in the diner scene, she's referring to Kill Bill. Just something that a few people on the internet have picked up on, and I thought was kind of interesting. The dinner scene only gets better from here, because then we get the famous dance scene, which is excellently directed and acted, and it's just so much fun to watch. followed by the most intense and absolutely wild and unexpected sequence where Mia overdoses on whatever drugs Vincent got earlier, and it works so well as a holy crap moment because of how the drugs were set up early in the movie with Vincent buying them off that guy, and the way the story was unfolding seemed like things might be getting a little frisky between Mia and Vincent, but hell no, the camera work on some of these shots is amazing. With the slow motion just before he stabs her in the chest with the needle, you get the really intense close-up of the tip, and you can see like the liquid sort of dripping out. It's just fantastic filmmaking. It's great filmmaking, and cherry on top of the best part of the movie for me. And it is pretty early on in the movie. It's like, I would say, the first act of the movie leading into the halfway point. And yeah, I just love this entire sequence all around. Like I said before, I hated it the first time because I thought it was boring, but the subtleties in the dialogue just make it so great. Uma Thurman, I gotta mention, does a great job as Mia Wallace, and we don't see a lot of her, but from what we do see, her sort of mysterious persona and intriguing backstory, it's a joy to watch on the screen. And I gotta give props to Tarantino for creating such a wide variety of interesting characters that all interact with each other in some way. It makes for some really interesting scenarios. Another favorite sequence of mine is when Butch has to go back to retrieve his golden watch. The one shot of him walking from his car into the apartment building, which is all filmed in one take. It's brilliantly shot. It is extremely intense, and then we notice that someone's actually in his house, and Vincent walks out from taking a dump and gets absolutely mowed down by Butch. It's honestly the turning point in the entire movie and took me by absolute surprise. Not only does it end there, the sequence continues when Butch is driving off and runs into Marcellus Wallace, crashes into him, then they get into a shootout, then they end up in the basement with the Gimp, and holy crap, I could go on and on about how ridiculously insane this sequence is and how crazy this movie gets, but none of it ever feels cringe or cheap or anything like that. It's all so addictingly rewatchable and entertaining due to, once again, the fantastic script, the obscure and unique characters, and the locations and situations these characters find themselves in. We then get some classic Tarantino gore when Butch slices the officer, and Ving Rhames gives easily my favorite line in the entire movie.
You hear me talking, hillbilly boy? I ain't through with you by damn sight. I'ma get medieval on your ass.
This movie is insanely quotable too, and that's another reason I think it remains a classic all these years later, is due to these great lines that just stuck around as the years went by. Now, the final chapter takes us back to where the film started, and we're back at the apartment with Jules and Vincent. This is the point where it's obvious we aren't moving forward through time because the timeline doesn't really make sense at this point. So we get a great scene where Vincent accidentally shoots Marvin in the head, and Sam Jackson during this entire sequence is comedy gold. Nearly every line he says during this part of the movie is hilarious. We even get a cameo from Tarantino himself, stating some questionable things about what his garage is indeed not. And we of course get a cameo from Harvey Keitel, who was in Reservoir Dogs. Now, this part of the movie, in my opinion, is easily the least engaging for me. Take that lightly because it's still fantastic stuff, but it just feels a little weird and not as much is really going on. It's really laid back compared to the rest of the movie, but all that changes once they decide to go eat breakfast at the diner, and we realize that it's the diner from the beginning of the movie, which at this point I had already forgotten about because it's such a short opening scene, and the movie, it's not a short movie either. Like, it's 2.5 hours have nearly passed by, and you're just like, oh yeah, I forgot about that diner, and you realize how it all connects. And in the back of your head, you're thinking, what was the point of that diner scene? Well, here's the payoff. Is when Samuel L. Jackson says,
we're all gonna be like three little Fonzies here. And what's Fonzie like? Come on, Yolanda, what's Fonzie like?
Cool.
What?
Cool.
Correctamundo. And that's what we're gonna be. We're gonna be cool.
it's just such a well-written scene, and Samuel L. Jackson, the way he delivers the lines is hilarious. And the entire dialogue here too about the shepherd and using the verse from the Bible and how he wants to give up the hitman life just has such classic status. Like, you know, when you're watching something and you're like, yeah, this is classic stuff right here. You're like, I know for sure this scene is clipped out somewhere on YouTube with like 10 million views. I knew that just while watching for the first time. Yeah, this scene right here, the final scene is just, it's classic stuff. The final scene of Pulp Fiction is funny, it's intense, it's impeccably written, and it certifies this movie as something more than just your average action drama. Now, there are a lot of theories going on online about what could be inside the briefcase that we see throughout the film, glowing orange light. Now, I'm one who goes with the majority of people who says that the briefcase simply just represents whatever the person opening it wants to see. It's a symbol of their innermost desires and wants, and that honestly, that's a good enough explanation for me. The non-linear nature of this movie adds something so unique about it that no other movie has ever tried to do or been successful at, in my opinion, and Tarantino himself has adapted a signature style of not telling his movies chronologically, but this movie still does it the best. The best way I could describe this movie to people is go in, watch it, and just enjoy the little things, because overall, there is an interconnecting story, but it runs very thin, and each chapter is very disjointed and not really connected to the last. On a first viewing, that it can be quite jarring, but once you go back and rewatch it, you understand how all the plots and chapters connect with each other, along with the characters. Like I said, this movie gets better and better every time you rewatch it, because you're less focused on putting everything together. You can just sit back, relax, enjoy the masterclass in writing, acting, character building, twists, turns, and everything else that's great about this movie. I also cannot talk about Pulp Fiction without mentioning the score. The soundtrack to this film is phenomenal, featuring some great songs that we all know to be classics, but also the way they are all used makes them have a purpose. They all fit the mood, tone, and theme of the scene they're in. My favorite use is the song You'll Be a Woman Soon, right before Mia overdoses. It's almost an eerie foreshadowing to what's about to happen to her character. The songs in this movie are all bangers, and honestly, Pulp Fiction wouldn't be known as well today without it. Tarantino knows what he's doing when it comes to soundtracks for his movies, and Pulp Fiction is no exception. There is very little about this movie that I dislike. I guess the one part I don't really get about this movie is a scene with Butch and Fabienne, and they're talking about pot bellies and blueberry pancakes. Like, I get it. It's the same sort of gimmick as the rest of the movie, just these seemingly wild characters having normal conversations, but I just don't really like that entire interaction. I find it kind of weird and cringy. Maybe that's just me, but it's easily the weakest part of the movie. But other than that, I have no other complaints about this movie. Pulp Fiction is one of those movies that you just never forget the first time you watch, but it is so infinitely rewatchable that it's like watching it for the first time over and over again. Pulp Fiction influenced so many other types of movies and filmmakers working today that it's really hard to deny its influence even if you don't like the movie, which, come on, how could you not like Pulp Fiction? This movie is awesome, one of my favorites of all time, a movie that inspires me, and overall a fantastic second feature from Tarantino. Well, that wraps up my discussion on Pulp Fiction. The Film Ignite podcast is intended to ignite discussion on all things film and TV, so I want to hear what you think about Pulp Fiction. Thank you for tuning into the second episode of the Film Ignite podcast. I'll see you next time.